I am so overdue for a haircut. You may not think so, but I can't do anything with it. Hey BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Book March. This is my bookish week for Saturday, October 29th. Hope you're all doing well. As you saw, I have met a third BookTube friend. I met up with AJ Dunn from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes in Woodstock, Vermont. I just showed you those pictures in the intro. Oh, it was awesome. It was last Saturday. It was a gorgeous day in New England, in Vermont, which is a state with some of the prime fall foliage. And we met in this little tiny downtown Woodstock, Vermont, went to a couple of bookshops, went to lunch. We saw Queechy Gorge and a waterfall. I don't know if it has a name. Those pictures I'm putting here. So it was just such a beautiful, wonderful day with a wonderful person. I had a blast with AJ, and I just love meeting my friends in person. So it was just wonderful. And let's see, now I have some books to talk to you about. I finished 3 books last week, and I did have a DNF, which I'm going to show you first to get that out of the way. I have DNF'd David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I just don't think it's for me. I may pick it back up again someday. I did get about maybe a third of the way through it. Again, I don't think it's for me. I do like Charles Dickens. This one, I don't know. And I am also not that big of a fan of the coming-of-age stories. So, yeah, it was okay for me. Again, I may, because I am a completist, go back to this at some point. But I put it aside. So, and the next 3 books, I had a really good reading week with the next 3. This one especially, this was my favorite of the week. And it was the one I finished earliest. This is Himself by Jess Kidd. Jess Kidd is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. She is hilarious. She is an Irish author. She wrote Things in Jars, which I think I have right here, and which I really liked. And I loved this book. I couldn't believe how much I really enjoyed it, had a great reading experience. I laughed, I was fascinated, I was interested, and did not expect it. And this is her debut novel. I was really surprised. This is the story of Mahoney, who, as an infant, was brought to an orphanage in a very small Irish village. He basically is, at the age of majority, he leaves the orphanage and goes to Dublin. But he comes back to his this village called Mulderig in his 20s, in his mid-20s, looking for his origins and looking for his mother or what happened to his mother. But one of the biggest things about Mahoney is that he can see dead people. And, well, actually, not just people. He can see dead people and creatures and animals all around him. It's right in the very beginning of the book, so it's not a spoiler. But this ends up being a mystery. What happened to his mother? Who brought him to the orphanage? What are the circumstances surrounding this little village that he hails from? And what is it with all the dead people? And what purpose does it serve? It's such a great story. There's a lot of intrigue and secrets. There is a lot of humor in the interactions of the Irish village. Mahoney is looked at as a city boy because he has the prodigal son coming back to his hometown from the city. And so everybody looks at him with some wariness and skepticism. It's set in the 70s, in the mid-70s. And so when he comes back to Mulderig, he has on the bell-bottom jeans and the long hair and the leather jacket. So they think he's a hippie. But it is just so funny. The dialogue that Jess Kidd writes into the story had me laughing. The situations that these characters find themselves in, the oddballs and the outcasts, it was just such a great story. I loved her writing. I loved how she describes her characters and the situations that she puts them in. So this was an excellent story, very well written, great mystery. I loved it. I even loved reading about the dead people, and those are some of the funniest parts of the book. So if you like fiction set in Irish villages written by Irish authors, if you like some magical realism in your books, this is not really a fairy tale. It's a book that includes ghosts or dead people, but they are not the main focus. They are a very important part of the story. But it was such a great novel. I loved it. The next one, really not coincidentally, was a huge recommendation on AJ's channel, and I picked it up pretty shortly after. This is Monogamy by Sue Miller. Now, if any of my book group is watching, don't watch this review because I am going to talk about this book. So if you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch this part of my video. I'm raising my hand because there will be spoilers for you. I'm not going to spoil the book, but if you don't want to hear my opinions, then don't watch. When I'm done, I will put my hand up again and let you know. So, Monogamy by Sue Miller. This was published, I believe, in 2020. 2020. So I think it's her latest novel. I did really enjoy it. Sue Miller is very good at a domestic drama. So this is a story of a married couple and their family. It says in the blurb that there's kind of a secret is discovered, a ruinous secret. And this is the story of Graham and Annie. Graham is a very large man in body and in personality. He is the owner of a Cambridge, Massachusetts bookstore, and Annie is an artistic photographer. And they have a daughter together, Sarah, and Graham has a son, Lucas, from his first marriage to his ex-wife, Frida. Is her name Frida? I think so. Yes, Frida. But what's interesting about it is Graham and Frida had an open marriage, but they got divorced because it didn't work for Frida, and she didn't want to have that type of a relationship. She felt insecure and jealous and not fulfilled in the level of intimacy in her marriage with Graham, so she initiated a divorce. Graham and Annie got married later on, but Annie and Frida became very good friends. So Miller is very good at talking about these relationships and how everybody is connected. There's a lot in the very beginning about Graham and the type of man that he is. He draws people to him. He is the social butterfly. He has a very large extroverted presence. Everybody around him loves him. He loves very deeply, very transparently. He is an excellent father, a wonderful friend, and he's also an adulterer. And so we read very clearly in the beginning of the novel each of their backstories. And that's another thing that Miller does extremely well, is how she characterizes the people that inhabit her novels. And so we know an enormous amount of each of the characters' backgrounds. We kind of delve into their inner monologues, their inner lives, and we kind of hear how this marriage developed, how it started, how it grew, and what happened over the years. Graham and Annie were married for 30 years, and so there's a lot of history in a marriage that long. But as it says in the beginning of the book, Graham very suddenly dies one night. And at that point, everybody's worlds turn upside down. And Annie is left to try to figure out what happens from here. How do I deal with this major life change? Everything I knew is gone. Everything that I knew how to do, I have to relearn. I have to do everything differently. My life is going to be, it's going to look completely different than what it was and what I expected. That part Miller kind of got, I don't know, maybe mixed up on. I don't think that part of the book was as successful as the way she characterized the people. And there were parts of the characters' motivations that I was skeptical about. I just didn't really feel like they would act that way in those situations. And quite often, in my opinion, she offered too much information about them as far as their inner dialogue and how they felt about one of the other characters in the novel. So that for me didn't work as well. However, it's a very smoothly written book. It is very easy to just keep reading. I just kept turning the page, and I really wanted to find out what happened to this family. It wasn't a perfect book for me. AJ had super high reviews on this, and I can see why. But for me, there were parts of it that just did not flow in the direction that I felt made sense. It could be just me, but I just questioned the decisions the characters made. I questioned how quickly things transitioned. I questioned a lot of their background and how they ended up where they did. So I did like the book, and I definitely think it's quite readable. So many people would highly enjoy this book, and I'm glad I read it. This is going to actually offer a lot of discussion for my in real life book group. I am done with that review. If you want to come back to the video, I don't even know if you bothered to stay this long. Okay, so the last book I finished is Fire Sermon by Jamie Quatro. Now, this book was in the first round of the BookTube Prize back in 2019. This book was published in 2018, and I wanted to read it back then, and I purchased it very shortly after it was in the BookTube Prize, and I hadn't read it until this past week. This is a very polarizing book. Either people have loved it or they've hated it. And the ones that have hated it have said it's garbage, there's too much religious references in it. The people that have loved it have said it's really interesting, the writing is interesting, and I'm on the camp of I really loved this book. It's very interesting. Now, this becomes so much richer if you are aware of or have knowledge of fundamentalist Christian purity culture and fundamentalist Christian evangelicalism. If you have experience with that or know about that, this is a much richer novel, because then you can very easily understand the characters and their motivations and the connections and the style of this author. Jamie Quatro is writing in a very interesting style, and I believe this is her first novel. I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure this is her debut. This is the story of Maggie, who is a woman who has been married to her husband Thomas for many, many years. They have 2 children. Maggie grew up in an evangelical Christian family. Thomas did not. And Thomas has some abandonment issues, some baggage from his family. And this is the story of another story of a marriage. And Maggie is kind of exploring and kind of ruminating with a therapist the state of her marriage and the fact that she has entered into an adulterous relationship with a poet named James. And Maggie is also a writer and an academic, and she has done a lot of research into different topics in theology and poetry and that type of thing. She started a correspondence with this poet named James, and it turned into something much deeper than that. But what is interesting about this book is her religion and how that wraps itself around adultery and marriage. If you are aware of what it means to get married in a so-called Christian marriage, and submission within marriage, the wife's submission, if you know about purity culture and saving yourself for marriage and getting married very young, this book will mean far more than if you are simply reading it and being insulted or offended by the religious content. Because Maggie is tormented because of her religious upbringing and because of the religion that teaches her that sex is sinful and that lustful thoughts are sinful. She's coming to terms with her sexuality and within and outside of her marriage. And so that's what's fascinating about this novel. It's not just a novel about scenes of adulterous sex, and it's not just a novel about a marriage breaking down, and it's not a novel about a woman cutting loose and letting go and, you know, removing inhibitions. It's not about all that. It's about a woman exploring how she feels about the judgment of God on her after the actions that she's taken, and does she really believe she has to live under that judgment? I thought it was fascinating. I was so interested. I read this within 2 days, but it took me a few hours. It's a short novel, and I just flew through it. It was just page turner, and I was fascinated by this book. She changes style. So part of the book is Maggie speaking with a therapist. Part of it is the reader reading into Maggie's background and her family, her husband Thomas. It goes back and forth into different perspectives. There are times when Maggie, we can read her point of view almost as if it's in second person. There are other times we're reading correspondence between her and James. It's very interesting. And so it jumps backwards and forwards in time. And it basically is a way for the reader to put together the pieces of this story. And I was hooked. I thought it was extremely well done. So those are the 3 books I finished and the one that I DNF'd. What am I currently reading? Very quickly, I am reading for the second time The Count of Monte Cristo with the Critical Chicks, my in real life book group. We just finished chapter 30. I'm on page 300 in that book. I am reading The Lords of Time by Eva Garcia Sáenz. This is translated from the Spanish by Nick Castor. And this is the 3rd in the Silence of the White City trilogy. I actually believe there's a 4th one coming out. I love this series, and so I picked this one up. It's a crime novel set in Spain, and the main investigator is Unai Lopez, whose nickname is Kraken. I love this series. And I just picked up Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. This is thanks to Susan at Road Reads. I am going to link her video below. She has called this the best novel of all time, and she had such a glowing review video of this book, and it's been on my shelf. I've always wanted to read it, and I said to myself, go to your bookshelf and pull that book off the shelf. You're reading it. So I don't know if I'll finish it for Victober, but I don't care. I've started it, and I will read it, and I'm really looking forward to it. That is it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the pictures and my account of meeting AJ in Woodstock, Vermont. Again, it was such a blast. So lovely. They are such a lovely person. We had a great conversation, and I had a great time with them. What else? I did buy some books, but I'm going to save those for another video. Let me know in the comments below what you think of any of the books I showed you, anything I said, anything at all. I would love to hear it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.